Hi, this is Omar here again. Today I'm going to talk about what is the difference between design thinking and lean startup and the intersection between these two things and what approach you should use. Okay, so design thinking is an empathic problem solving framework. Its aim is to validate problems through experimentation. So the idea here is that if you have um, a persona or a customer that you want to solve a problem for, but you don't know exactly what the problem is, design thinking is the best tool there. Lean Startup is a concept validation framework, and its aim is to validate products through experimentation. So the slight difference here is that you have a solution. You have a solution in mind, and now you just need to validate it. And you're not exactly sure who's going to want it, but you're just looking at the solution. So, what do these two things have in common? Well, it's surprising that a large percent of their DNA is experimentation. So they're mostly very similar because their shared DNA is experimentation. It's a big part. So if they are so similar, then which one should you start with? So before we get there, I guess the question I would ask you is what is the biggest risk? Is the biggest risk whether someone will actually want this product, or is the biggest risk will customers want this? Right. So one is about the product, the other one is about the customer. Which is your focus? Okay. So as we start, I guess you're going to want to understand what is the true nature of your starting position. And so up the top there's design thinking, which is about high risk problems. Not that much is known about the customer. I mean, you have a customer in mind, but you need to know more about them and what they want, what motivates them. And down the bottom there is lean startup, which is a high risk solution. So you've got a high risk solution. You know somewhat about the customer. You're just trying incremental improvements. You're just trying for incremental improvements. So you may start in lean startup and then move to design thinking as you move through the problem space. So you may have a solution, but then you're like, oh, you know what? We don't have that much knowledge of the customer. We need sort of deeper knowledge of the customer. And it just happens. And it just happens like that at times, right? So you'll start with one and you move to the other. It depends on, again, what is the nature of the problem at the time. And if you're somewhere in between, then just roll the dice and get started. See, again, it's about the problem space. If the problem is somewhat complicated and you have an idea of what the solution is, or you know the solution, then analysis is probably going to help. But if it's a complex scenario where you don't know what the potential solution is, you've got to just probe and sense. And both design thinking and lean startup give you that opportunity. There are many different shapes this could take. You could do a portion in design thinking, a portion in lean startup. You could have them running in parallel, do them in sprints, and then that's feeding into lean startup. There are many different shapes. Here's something that I put together that could help you get started. So here we have trade-off sliders. On the left-hand side, we've got a high-risk problem. On the right-hand side is a high-risk solution. You just, put your dot wherever you think is more of the risk. Not much is known about the customer. A lot is known about the customer. You could sort of like plot your place, and depending on where those dots are, it'll give you an indication of where you should start. This is a nice, lean, very quick way just to get started. Again, if you're in a complex space, you'll just want action. You'll have to have a bias for action, and this does that. So what happens if you get started with lean startup and you're wrong? Well, you might incur the cost for a sprint or two until the team corrects course. And if you start with design thinking and you're wrong, the same happens, right? And the reason is because the shared DNA is experimentation, and you're going to figure out pretty quickly. So again, a bias for action is important. So how to govern this? First thing you got to do is iterate the solution using customer feedback. So customer feedback is the food, and through experimentation, you're going to get the customer feedback. So the point here is that experimentation, iteration is the shared DNA of both styles. And so again, just getting started, you're going to find yourself heading into a similar space regardless of which one you pick. You're going to want to hold a regular cadence around pivoting or persevering. I think this is important. This is something that comes out of mostly lean startup, but this discipline in design thinking is quite important too. So you're going to want to have to make and have a regular cadence around making hardline decisions with the original goal in mind, right? So this is something that comes out of lean startup, which is really important. And if you're working in something like an agile style, there are sprint showcases which provide that. But if you're not working like that, you'll want to have a regular cadence where you're inviting people who are potentially influential in your space or concerned about what you're doing, and have them in and have them think about the original metrics and make a decision around whether, okay, keep going with this, or maybe it's time to pivot, or even like let it perish. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they fall into sunk costs and they keep on going. And I've seen teams, I've seen organizations waste a lot of time and money, huge amounts of money on this. So sunk costs is a big trap, and do not fall into it by having a regular cadence around pivot, persevering, or even perishing ideas. The last thing that will help is just having a regular release train, ideally monthly, where you expose your thinking to customers. So it's really important to have an experiment platform that gives you that ease. So regardless of whether you're in design thinking or lean startup mode, just exposing your thinking to your customers regularly is going to be crucial. And some of that pre-work that you'll need to do is have some sort of experiment platform, depending on what sort of product you're building. You'll want something that you can just shoot out there really easy. Okay, that is it. Thank you so much.